Autistic Tony Stark by ajexists. Work 7. It's not an excuse, it's a reason. He's out of coffee. Fuck. Tony has an addiction to coffee, one of the only addictions he's had in his life that he's not ashamed of, but that's besides the point. Tony loves his coffee. He's had many different kinds of coffee from many different places, although his favourite one, and the one he keeps at home, is an original traditional Italian, dark roast coffee from the Bean Coffee Company. The smooth bitter flavour with a hint of his mother's heritage always brought him a sense of comfort, familiarity. But now he's out of coffee. At first he doesn't freak out, at least not too much. He's down in the lab since it's one of Peter's lab days, and he's been going down there a lot working on projects, so he goes upstairs to the kitchen to get the bag from there. He opens the cupboard that usually holds the coffee bag. It's not there. Tony, almost frantically, looks in every cupboard in the kitchen. Once, twice, 3 times. Still no coffee. He groans and rapidly taps his hands on the counter, trying to think of anywhere else he would put a bag of coffee grounds. Nowhere. He was out of coffee. It is at this point where Peter shows up for lab. He walks in and sees Tony in the kitchen and smiles wide. "Hi, Mr. Stark." His smile immediately turns to concern when he processes the state he's in. Half of the kitchen cabinets are open, Tony very clearly upset, anxiously stimming. Peter walks over and asks, "What's wrong?" Tony looked up and sighed, doing a small wave. "Hey, kid." Tony sighed again, this time running his hands through his hair. "It's stupid." "It's not stupid if it's making you upset, Mr. Stark." "It's not making me upset." Peter bit back from responding with, "Yes, it clearly is." Instead, he said, "Okay, I still want to know why you're..." He waved his hand up and down at Tony, not knowing what word to say. Tony once again ran his hand through his hair, then stood up properly to say, "I'm completely out of coffee. There was none down in the lab, and apparently there's none up here either." "Oh no," Peter frowned. "I'm sorry, Mr. Stark." Tony rolled his eyes. "Thanks, kid, but I don't need to be patronised." "I'm not patronising you, I'm being genuine." Tony had no response to that. The two were quiet for a few seconds before Peter asks, "Is your coffee sold in stores? Because if it is, we could run to the store before we start to get your coffee." "It is sold in stores." He liked it because if he was running low and he couldn't get the £5 bag delivered quick enough, he could go to the store and get a couple of the £1 bags to fill in for the time the £5 bag was being delivered. The only reason he's hesitant is because it's lab time. A good chunk of their time doing lab work would be taken away by this coffee run, plus it's a change of routine. But he can't do lab without his coffee. Tony glanced over at the kid. "Are you sure that's okay?" "Yeah, I'm sure," Peter smiled. "I've had a good week, so I'll be able to handle the slight change of plans." That reassured Tony. He was happy to know it wouldn't cause Peter any distress. As for himself, though, he shook off those feelings and smiled back at Peter. "All right, I'll go get my wallet and keys, and then we'll stop at the nearest grocery store, all right?" "Got it!" Peter bounced up and down. Tony went to his bedroom and grabbed the items he needed, as well as grabbing a hat for some extra disguise. He met Peter back down in the common room before heading down to the garage and getting in one of Tony's cars. The two drove off to the nearest grocery store, which was luckily a short drive, even with the NYC traffic. During the car ride, Peter blabbered on about his day in school. "I got an A on my history test, Mr. Stark." "That's awesome, kid." They eventually arrived at the grocery store and made their way inside. Peter continued to talk about school, now telling him about the conversations him, Ned and MJ had at lunch. Tony quietly listened as he weaved his way through aisles to get to where the coffee was stocked. They got to the aisle and headed down. Tony walked down to where they stock the Bean coffee products, taking a shaky breath when he noticed how limited their stock was. The two looked at every single bag. No. They read the labels over and over again, moving the bags that were up front to look at the bags in the back. No again. It wasn't in the store. Peter looked at Tony worryingly, who at this point was clenching his fists beside him. "Maybe check online?" "Still not going to solve the problem of it not being here now." Tony would later regret how he said it, not recognising in the moment how rude it sounded. Instead, he begrudgingly took out his phone and went on the company's website. He scrolled until he found the coffee he liked. Sold out, will restock Sunday. Today was Wednesday. And even then, once Sunday arrives, it usually takes them a week to ship out the order and have it delivered. So at best he won't get his coffee for another week and a half, at worst, 2 weeks or more. Tony squeezed his eyes shut and clenched his fist, the hand around his phone also going into a tighter grip. Peter once again looked at him concerned. Mr. Stark? Instead of talking, Tony handed the phone to him. Peter looked at the screen and read the same message Tony did. Oh. Tony crossed an arm in front of his chest, the other arm on top of that, with that hand spread across his face. His foot was also rapidly tapping. He was starting to panic. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't go potentially 2 weeks without coffee. Panicking over coffee. Pathetic. Peter handed Tony back his phone. Could you maybe get the traditional French roast one instead? I don't know how different it is, but... French is bitter, different roasting times, Italian tastes a lot stronger. Peter bit his lip while Tony said what he wanted to say. Once he finished, Peter started again. It might be better to get the French roast coffee from this brand that you like, rather than a similar flavour but from a completely different company. He rocked in silence, then looked down. Or, I don't know, whatever you think is best. The thing is, Peter isn't wrong. He used to get their French roast before the Italian, and he enjoyed it, but he much prefers the Italian, and the French roast just isn't the same. He stood there for a while trying to think of what to do, when he suddenly remembered that he was freaking out over a type of coffee. Tony, almost aggressively, snatched 2 of the French roasts off the shelf. Let's go. Oh, okay. The 2 walked back to the front of the store to check out. Tony was quiet the whole walk, gripping the coffee bags like they personally attacked him somehow. Peter kept glancing up at the man, his concern and worry becoming increasingly apparent on his face. He pulled out a stim toy he had in his pocket, a marble mesh to be exact, and stimmed with that. He was feeling a lot of tension right now. He couldn't imagine how Tony was feeling. Tony was berating himself in his head. How could you be this upset over coffee? Get over yourself. Who in their self-respecting mind would cry over getting a different kind of coffee? Wait a minute. He wipes his eyes, feeling them sting with tears. Yep, he's crying because of coffee. He takes a deep breath, trying to calm himself down. You're okay. Calm down. It's literally just coffee. He leads them to the self-checkout line, not wanting to embarrass himself in front of a cashier. He pays for the coffee grounds and quickly heads out the store. He gets to the car and tosses the coffee bags in the back seat. In the corner of his eye, he sees Peter get in the passenger's seat. Shit, we still have lab. Tony shakily takes a deep breath and reminds himself, lab time is fun. Don't let some stupid coffee roast ruin it for you. Then gets in the driver's seat. Tony drives them back to the tower, trying to ignore Peter's worried glances at him. He's fine, it's just some coffee. Once they arrive, the 2 immediately head to the lab. Tony tells Peter to get started, and he heads over to the coffee pot. He stares at the bags. The packaging's the same, the only difference being the French roast instead of Italian. He likes French roast coffee. He even likes this brand's version of it. So why does he still not want it? A part of him wishes he never went out, so he never had to see it out of stock. But then he thinks about how he always makes himself a new cup of coffee before lab. He always does. Couldn't he have gone one day, though, without this? If it weren't for that, he wouldn't be in this mess. Why did this have to be a mess anyway? It's just coffee. It's just coffee. Why do I keep freaking out over coffee? Probably because it's one of your safe foods and we went out of routine. Tony flinched and turned around, looking over at Peter. Peter seemed to not notice the flinch and kept talking. I guess coffee isn't really a food, though, so... safe drinks? That sounded weird. Did I say that out loud? Tony interrupted. About the coffee thing. Peter bit his lip and nodded. Yeah, sorry, Mr. Stark. Tony waved it off and sighed. He tossed the bags on the table and sat on the couch next to it, putting his head in his hands. Peter slowly gets up, walks over and sits beside him. He asked, Are you okay? Tony huffed out a laugh, moving his hands away from his face to now start rubbing them. No, which is stupid. It's not stupid, Mr. Stark. Kind of feels like it is. But it's not, though. I told you, coffee is one of your safe drinks. What does that even mean? Safe drinks, or more often you'll hear safe foods, are foods that autistic people deem as, well, safe. They can also be called same foods, Peter said. They're kind of like a comfort item. It's something an autistic person can consistently eat or drink and not have to worry about the texture or the taste. A lot of people have bread or mac and cheese as a safe food. It's also kind of like a favourite food, but sometimes, especially when you're going through a burnout or having a meltdown, it can be the only thing you want to eat or drink. Okay, Tony said, tapping his foot. Doesn't explain why I'm freaking out over my supposed safe drink. Well, that's where routine and being resistant to change comes into play, Peter explained. Yes, you have many different types of coffee all over the place, but at home you know and expect it to be this one particular brand or flavour of coffee. Then you find out that you ran out, and not only did you run out, it happened on a lab day. So you have to disrupt your routine of lab time to go to the grocery store to get more. Once you get there, though, it only becomes worse because the flavour you specifically get at home is out of stock, so you're forced to get a flavour you don't normally get. Peter looked up at Tony. So not only was your routine disrupted, you also had to deal with the sudden change of not having your regular safe coffee for the next week or two. Tony listened to what Peter said. He tried to take it in, but he just sighed. It still feels ridiculous. Tony ran his hands through his hair, punched his legs a couple of times, then clenched his fists. There's no excuse for me to get this worked up about some... He punched his leg again. Stupid coffee. Peter quickly grabbed the pillow on the couch and handed it over to Tony. It's not an excuse, Mr. Stark. He felt relieved when Tony grabbed the pillow and squeezed it. It's a reason. Tony put his face against the pillow and took deep breaths, trying to get himself to calm down. Without realising, he slowly started rocking, which helped him relax. He heard Peter get up and walk somewhere. When he heard him come back, Tony looked up. Peter handed him a bike chain fidget, which Tony took, feeling grateful. Peter sat back down and the two quietly stimmed. Peter grabbed himself a tangle while getting the bike chain for Tony. After a few minutes, Peter spoke up again. You know and accept that you're autistic, Mr. Stark, right? Tony shakily sighed. I do know, and most days I accept it. I still have moments, though. He sadly chuckled. Clearly. It's okay, Peter said while nodding his head. Being autistic, it affects every part of our lives, even small things. So yes, maybe to a neurotypical person, getting upset over having to get a different kind of coffee seems inconsequential or ridiculous. But like I said to you before, it wasn't just a different kind of coffee. It was a disruption of your routine and being confronted with change. Two things very commonly known to be things autistic people struggle with. Our minds think and process the world differently, so we have to try to not hold ourselves to the standards of neurotypical people. Tony smirked. Easier said than done. I know, I struggle with it too, Peter said, looking up at Tony. I was also late diagnosed, so I probably have a lot of the same thoughts you probably do. He then paused. Granted, I was diagnosed way earlier than you, and have been diagnosed for longer. Plus, I've always had a harder time masking, and I don't have shitty parents. Okay, I get it. Tony put a hand on Peter's shoulder to get him to stop rambling. Also, my mom tried. She wasn't perfect, especially when I was a teen, but it wasn't her fault. Peter nodded. Sorry, Mr. Stark. It's okay, kid. He moved his hand and went back to stimming with the bike chain fidget. Tony still had some feelings of shame, a voice in his head saying that he should grow up and not cry over something small and stupid. But he reminded himself that Peter is right. He is autistic. He processes the world differently, so something that may seem small to someone could be a big deal to him. He takes a deep breath. It's okay. You're allowed to be upset over coffee. You're not neurotypical. Your brain doesn't process the world like them, so even something small can be a genuine struggle. Because it is, and that's okay. It's not an excuse. It's a reason. Tony takes another deep breath. He looks over at Peter, who's quietly stimming with the tangle. He says, "Sorry for being a bit of a mess." He looks down at his watch to check the time. "And for wasting over an hour of lab time." "It's okay, Mr. Stark," Peter smiled. "As I said, my week has been good, so overall I don't feel too bad." He looked up. "How are you feeling?" Tony smiled. "Better." He paused, then added on, "You know this will probably happen again. Not the coffee thing specifically, but the..." Tony trailed off. "Internalized ableism?" "Yeah, that." "I know, it sucks, especially when you're trapped in like an internalized ableism loop," Peter grimaced. "It sucks that it's part of being autistic, and worse in the case of a late diagnosed autistic. That's why, though it's important to find a community, to have someone understand your struggles so they can help you when you're feeling down or doubting yourself." Tony chuckled and rolled his eyes. "That's cheesy, kid." He looked over at him with a fond smile. Peter giggled. "Yeah, well," he shrugged, "I like cheese." Tony laughed. Shortly after their talk, the two worked on a smaller project during lab time since they didn't have as much time as usual. Tony still couldn't get himself to drink the coffee the rest of the night. Over the next 2 weeks, he ended up having only a small cup of coffee in the morning, then the one he always makes before lab time. The rest of the time he had water and smoothies. He felt off during those 2 weeks, partly because of the slight caffeine withdrawal he was experiencing, but also because of the change in coffee flavour. Thanks to Peter, and Pepper when he told her what was happening, he was able to remind himself that this was normal. It was normal for him. That it's okay something small like a type of coffee could make him upset, as he was autistic. He just processes the world differently, and that's okay. Then 2 weeks later, he came back from his meeting and saw boxes of the coffee, his coffee, sitting on the floor. The relief he felt was immeasurable, and that's okay too. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.